Lane says that the win over LSU wasn't fluky, and it wasn't. But I'll take it a little bit further than that.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast around. I am your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. On today's show, we will start with Lane Kiffin's weekly Zoom, where he made it clear that the win over LSU wasn't fluky. What does that mean? That statement speaks volumes about what the national conversation is about to become surrounding Ole Miss and what this team is building. Next, we will look at the newest addition to the 2026 class, Dorian Barney, a four-star commit who adds a ton of firepower to the Rebels' recruiting momentum as we flip ahead. And we'll also talk about the development and growth of William Echoles and Cam Franklin. Their development over the last few games has been pretty impressive to watch, and continuing that trajectory will be critical for Ole Miss moving forward. All of this and more on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available in all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So it's a bye week, which means that they're not going to have the normal Monday press conference, but they did have the Sunday night Zoom after the LSU game where some things got talked about in that press conference setting. And Lane Kiffin was his usual self, but the one quote that kind of got my attention, he said he's glad that the Ole Miss people got to get another win over LSU. It wasn't really one of those fluke wins. Really happy and proud of our guys. That's Lane Kiffin on the win over LSU. And it wasn't fluky. Ole Miss dominated that game. They physically in every way beat down LSU. The scoreboard was extremely flattering to the LSU Tigers at the end of the game because Ole Miss controlled that game from start to finish, really. The offense for LSU generated 250 yards for the entirety of the game, and one of them was on a 50-yard explosive pass that was badly underthrown that the receiver was able to adjust and run a little bit. That is where we are in this game. And Ole Miss probably was 3 scores better than LSU on this day. And listen, they have problems. They have flaws. And I think the hilarious joke would be, they're always talking about they're trying to do the same thing that Ole Miss did in 2024. And that was exactly the weekend on that exact field where Ole Miss lost to Kentucky. So they are on track for that. But Ole Miss is a good team. It's not fluky that Ole Miss won the game because Ole Miss was just better than LSU. LSU fans won't want to hear that, but Ole Miss was the better team. They won in all the phases. Heck, when LSU trotted out a receiver to play running back in that game, there's flashbacks to Florida that happened all over the place by the Ole Miss fan base. And you kind of got the feeling it's like, yeah, I think they know that they're not good enough to win this game. Now, that defense is really good. They are really good. And Ole Miss putting up nearly 500 yards on that really good defense actually is another plus that landed in the category. And because of that, the national conversation surrounding Ole Miss has changed overnight. Whether it's Trinidad Chambliss, whether it's this football program, whether it's expectations, I watched reaction shows and podcasts all over on Sunday and Monday, and everybody is like, well, I was wrong about Ole Miss. Everybody's trying to revise predictions. Everybody is wondering what was happening. The story that you heard all offseason into this first month is Ole Miss lost so much talent with Jackson Dart and Walter Nolan and Princely and Mamiellen and those guys. There's no way they can replace those guys, right? Well, yeah, they can, because those aren't just brought in to do it. They were part of a bigger organism that was being created. And I always talk about on the show that Lane Kiffin's biggest gift is actually roster building, and Ole Miss's roster is absolutely fantastic. So they're all revising predictions. You're starting to see Ole Miss pop up in playoff predictions. Ole Miss is ranked currently, according to the AP and the coaches poll, number 4 in the nation. Completely top 5 program. And honestly, they deserve it, but they deserve it going back to the middle of the summer. My prediction that I am very, very proud to put on the screen. I do this in July every single year, and I keep this in the overlay compartment for Streamer so I can bring this up at any time. This is what I called back in July. Now, there's a chance that Ole Miss can drop a game that they're not supposed to. That South Carolina, that Florida game, I don't know. At Mississippi State could be tricky depending on how the season goes. But the at Georgia and at Oklahoma is where it gets interesting. And the conversation from now on September 29th, September 30th through October 18th, because in the reality, Washington State probably isn't going to win that game. But that 3-week period with Ole Miss just kind of existing in the top 5, because that's what they're going to do. They're just going to exist in the top 5. And then you have that game at Georgia to where so much can happen for Ole Miss. Trinidad Chambliss right now, number 5 in the country in Heisman odds. The 5th best odds, and not far back behind the leader, which is Dante Moore of Oregon, by the way. Trinidad Chambliss is roughly 12-1 to win the Heisman Trophy per FanDuel. And honestly, it makes sense if you just look at it. Part of you wants to say, because of the storyline that you hear and everybody talks about a D2 quarterback, you know, he's the first quarterback in the last 30 years to throw for 300 yards and run for over 50 yards in 3 consecutive games. Him starting out like that puts him at a different level, and a win over LSU means that everybody is going to pay attention to what he is doing. He has a chance. If Ole Miss beats Georgia in Athens on national TV, ABC, likely at night, because if it was in Bald Hemingway, it'd be afternoon, but over in Athens, I can almost guarantee you it'd be at night. But if Ole Miss can pull off that game, it would completely ruin Georgia's season. Absolutely ruin it. It would be over. And the way the schedule sets up for the Bulldogs, they have to go to Jordan-Hare with all the ghouls and goblins the week before, and the week after they've got Florida and the cocktail party down in Jacksonville. Then Ole Miss is kind of sandwiched in between. If Ole Miss can get that game, and I do think it's important to get that game, because Oklahoma, you're going to be beat up. The whole factor of after you play Georgia, you are going to be a beat-up football team that's going to exist. They are going to want to run downhill on you. They couldn't run the ball last year. They could 2 years ago. They could not last year. And because of that, they are going to come downhill. The conversation over the next 3 weeks, Ole Miss is a top 5 program. Trinidad Chambliss is up there in the Heisman voting. Listen, if Dante Moore has a bad game, which is possible, I mean, it's possible. Ty Simpson has a bad game against Vanderbilt. By the time Ole Miss plays Georgia, Trinidad Chambliss could be the number 3, number 2 betting favorite to win the Heisman Trophy in the middle of October. This is not a Johnny-come-lately, passing by, passing fancy type thing. This is getting real by the moment. And Ole Miss getting this bye week means that they don't even play a football game again until like October 11th. And they don't play a team that can really threaten them until October 18th. So it's a half a month of just building up this narrative when other people can mess up, because that happens in college football. Whoever plays, somebody is going to mess up. This is a chance to rise yourself up, because listen, Ole Miss has the best betting odds potentially, I think, to make the SEC championship game with Missouri. I saw that Locked On Missouri posted that on Twitter. And with the win over Georgia, That's 4-0 in the conference. If you go 3-1 between Oklahoma, South Carolina, Florida, and Mississippi State, you're going to finish 7-1, and you're going to end up in Atlanta. You're likely going to be playing for a host spot or a bowl spot. You won't even get a home playoff game in that scenario, because if you win the SEC, you're going to be waiting to the bowl game. So it is going to be interesting. I'm pretty fired up to see what happens, but the national conversation around Ole Miss has changed. It's not fluky that Ole Miss is here. Everybody said that Ole Miss was going to rebuild, and the pieces were already there. Really interesting stuff. I'm pretty fired up to see where it goes down the road. You know, the key to this Ole Miss team has always been the front seven, and now two massive cogs are starting to flash just as the schedule gets tough. With SEC play heating up, this is exactly when those pieces need to click. We'll talk about who's stepping up and why it matters so much for the Rebels' defensive identity and how it could define the stretch run of the season, coming up next. You know, one of the tools that help you make a huge difference for business owners is Quo. That's formerly Open Phone. And it's the same great business phone system that you've heard me talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call you have is money left on the table. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or computer, so there's no more carrying two phones or relying on a landline. I love how Quo, formerly known as Open Phone, lets your team share one number and collaborate on calls and text like a shared inbox, so no customer gets left out or left hanging. See why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly Open Phone. Get started and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. And you've got, if you have existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over for no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, comment on the video, subscribe to the podcast on whatever audio podcast you're listening to, and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but it helps keep all of this free. If you want more, join the Insiders program on the subtext link down below. No trolls, 14-day free trial, and the easiest way ever to cancel. So give it a try. And don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college or pro, is available to you. Listen, this, I don't want to say resurgence by the Ole Miss Rebels, because they're just getting better. From the Georgia State game to now, it's like night and day already. And a lot of that has to do with the development of Cam Franklin and Will Echoles on the defensive line. Will Echoles was an absolute monster. And think about this. You're playing against the LSU Tigers, okay, who spent $18 million on a transfer portal roster to make them explosive, with a quarterback that was the only quarterback in the nation returning that threw for over 4,000 yards this year. And you knew going into the game, because if I knew, they knew, and that's the way that works. I don't have any like inside crazy information that the football coaches don't get, but if LSU was able to run the ball, that offense could get unlocked. They would be problematic, all of that stuff. And Ole Miss having the confidence to run a 3-man defensive line for the whole game. There was no running them out of it. LSU ran for 57 yards. It was 3-man rush the entire game. And the 3 different defensive linemen was Xavier Harris, Cam Franklin, and William Echoles. And early in the year, the only player on the defensive line that was really flashing was Xavier Harris. And we talked about him having an all-SEC level fall camp going through, and he was going to show out immediately, and he did. But Will Echoles won the starting job at the 3 technique position, and Cam Franklin won the job in the position that Jared Ivey played a year ago, I knew it was going to take a little bit of time because you have to adjust to the speed of the game and all of that. And especially playing non-conference games, Georgia State can be difficult. You have Tulane and then all of a sudden LSU. By LSU, you want to be situated. When you looked up going into this LSU game, Ole Miss was ranked somewhere around 16th in the SEC in rush defense. And that is mainly because of explosive plays that were given up against Georgia State and against Kentucky and against Arkansas, like the one play against Arkansas where it just weren't lined up. I understand that it was about explosive plays. When it was coming to running, it wasn't the other team was just running it down your throat. It was because you were making explosive errors. And a lot of that probably happened and dealt with the newness of that group. Listen, as they get more and more comfortable, they're going to be fine. And this is now going in when I go to Athens. It'll be their fourth SEC road game for the defensive line. And the defense gets better each and every game. Pretty much the halftime point of the Arkansas game was the point they started getting better and getting legitimately better. And all of a sudden, people in the secondary started making plays. Like Wydett Williams has an interception and a fumble recovery so far in the last 3 games or so. And I was curious to see exactly how it would go. Because if you can remember the 2023 Georgia game, Ole Miss went into that game having a pretty explosive defense. Their ability to get to the quarterback with J.J. Pegues and Jared Ivey and those dudes, they were able to force pressure over the course of the whole season. This was the team that completely shut down Penn State in the Peach Bowl, and it was also the core that they brought Walter Nolan and Princely Mamiellan and Trey Amos and those guys into. So this year, everybody thought it was going to be a step back. Well, if you didn't think it was going to be a step back, I mean, you haven't really necessarily been paying attention. But the replacements and the reason it was going to be a step back was not because the talent disparity from one to the next. That's the thing. Everybody said Ole Miss went 9-3 a year ago, and they have to take a step back after you lose that much talent. So they automatically marked it at 7-5 or 8-4 as a step back. And I was like, no, that was a 12-0 team. So a step back could be 10-2. It could be a better record and take a step back. And at the beginning of the year, all of these young players that were lining up on the defensive line and at linebacker and all of that, they were having growing pains. They were having struggles. And Cam Franklin was there, who he has like 14 pressures, quarterback pressures at this point. One of the leaders in the NCAA, and he hasn't gotten home yet. He will. Just the laws of averages says that he will. And Will Echoles, who had that pretty awesome sack against LSU on Saturday. Those two players started developing exponentially from game to game to the point where against LSU, they were a problem. They were a problem every single snap. And let's not act like LSU doesn't have dudes, okay? They have trouble running the ball. That could be schematic, but LSU lost some one-on-ones. And the people that they brought in, they were highly ranked people that they brought in that have played a lot of football. And they got absolutely whipped by these two young boys from the state of Mississippi that basically alternated the number one player in the state of Mississippi. So it is interesting to see how quickly they're developing. And there's 3 weeks to go. They're going to cut back practice time this week. They do that every bye week, give them a little bit of break, save some legs, all of that stuff. Get some people healthy, like Caden Lee, who caught a touchdown pass after the fact, but he hurt his arm a little bit on that fumble earlier in the game. So this gives him a chance to get healthy. This Ole Miss team should be very interesting. And if you look at the conversation changing that we talked about in the first segment, this is another part of it. As they get better and better, people are going to be surprised because they either held last year against Ole Miss in this year's rankings, which there are several so-called journalists that did that, held the 9-3 season against them because they went out on a limb and said they were going to win the national championship and they failed, and all of a sudden somebody has to pay for that. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't work like that. And there's been quite a few wait and see people, but the perfect storm in this game and this team and this whole narrative around Ole Miss. We talk about them becoming part of the national conversation. We talk about the young players developing. You add that with the emergence of Trinidad Chambliss at quarterback, which the whole country loves that story. The D2 quarterback to SEC quarterback, 5th in the Heisman ranking, all of that stuff. That's big. And the Lane Kiffin documentary. This is a guy that was a complete villain. And he probably still is in Tennessee, but he was a complete villain that somehow they're doing a redemption arc on this character. And you can see the thoughtfulness. You can see all of that stuff out there. You can tell by the way he coaches that he's changed a little bit. So we'll see. This Ole Miss rise, or where they want to be, whatever you want to call it, is largely due to the development of Will Echoles and Cam Franklin. If that continues, because they are nowhere near their ceiling. Will Echoles has a Walter Nolan level ceiling. Okay. So once they get there, once they play a lot of football, once they do all that, he has a chance to be really special. Cam Franklin, you see number 5 out there, it just reminds you of Robert Kimdichie. And you can line up and play a true 3-man front from time to time like you did against LSU and have a 340-pound end and a 290-pound end and Will Echoles taking up the center. I think that's what's interesting. That allows you to do some certain movements because of the size and athleticism of the defensive lineman. Anyway, let's take a quick break real quick. In our final segment, Ole Miss just locked in a 4-star commitment. Meet the newest Rebel recruit and find out exactly what that means for the team going forward next. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you won't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. You can bet on Trinidad Chambliss being plus 1,200 to win the Heisman at this point if you get those bonus bets. So we'll see. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel kind of gives you so many ways to play. I built parlays, tried player props, and even followed a live bet game during the games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you have a little something riding on the action, whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats. FanDuel is making the game day experience easier and so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Listen, I love recruiting. I do. I spent several years at Rivals.com doing that. I kind of cut my teeth in this industry over there doing that. I love it. Whenever a kid commits, the first thing you want to do is look at the video of that player, see how they match up and all of that. We are about 2 months away from signing day, so much so Brian Smith, I'm going to talk to him on Wednesday. I think that show will air Saturday morning. I think I'll put that on Saturday morning as well. But we're going to talk some recruiting and the way it sits for Ole Miss. And Dorian Barney's a good player. He's from Carrollton, Georgia, which, if you don't know, that is the same high school that Caleb Odom went to. Carrollton's a little bit of a power in the state of Georgia. There's a lot of powers in the state of Georgia, if we're going to be honest. But this is a flip from Michigan. And Michigan's pretty good at recruiting defensive backs. They have a nice little history about the defensive backs. He's 6 foot 175. And if you want to look at his rankings, he's a 4-star consensus, 237 player in the country. He is a 3-star on Rivals. He's a 4-star, number 24 cornerback on 247. And the 4-star, number 15 quarterback and number 110 player overall, according to ESPN. Important to remember that ESPN rankings are done off of the Under Armour Combine list. That's where they get that information. That's how the Under Armour All-American Game selects players. They're going off of that list. So Dorian Barney is a really good player. And the first thing you notice when you watch his highlights from time to time, he looks a little bit bored out there. He's one of those guys, he might be a little bit too good for this level. Now that's going to change, and he's going to have a rude awakening just a little bit down the road, right? Is somebody that is going to get good really quick, and he's going to have to adapt. But on the high school level, he is really good at keeping the other player from catching the ball, but he is from time to time a step late, a half a step late. That just comes honestly from boredom, because if you see him running around and the quick twitchiness of his athleticism out there, you can tell whenever he's locked in, he's a different animal than when he's not. Dorian Barney is a 4-star for a reason. He's an excellent player, and he's somebody that Pete Golding's going to take and put on the back end of the defense and has a chance to be pretty good. He reminds me a little bit of somebody that's on the roster right now, kind of looks like Chris Graves, who ended up about the same position graduating from high school. So I think Dorian Barney has a chance to be a really good player for Ole Miss moving forward. Again, he went to high school in Carrollton, Georgia, the same high school as Caleb Odom, and the quarterback that went to Colorado, I forgot his name, but he was part of that team at Carrollton as well. They have a indoor facility for their high school or something like that. Yeah, it's ridiculous how much money and how much is going into these high school programs in the state of Georgia. They're quickly trying to become what Texas is or what Texas was, but it's developing really quickly. Again, he's a cornerback that you see that. Hard to catch the ball on him. He's really good at stopping. If you look at his mid-year highlights from his senior year, the other team avoids him most of the time because if he's on, he's going to make you hurt, and he can make you hurt. Dorian Barney going to Michigan, going to Ole Miss, it'll be interesting to see exactly how that plays out. I do think it's so close to signing day, it is relevant that he is committed, and Ole Miss has several other players that they're looking to flip. It's kind of flip season, so pay attention to visits and who was at the Washington State game, who is at the South Carolina game, who's at the Florida game. Pay attention to those as well. So it should be pretty interesting to see exactly how that goes. Anyway, thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the front door of Ole Miss. If you don't believe me, Google Ole Miss Podcast and see how much we come up. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps the show, and it is completely free. Your support means the world to us. It's another big moment on Locked On. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV are presenting College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation alongside two-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. I've been on a couple times this year. A college football preview only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. Hotty toddy, everybody. Remember, analytics are just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.